Okay, war council time. Work out how we're going to tell the rest of the residents exactly how bad things are. No lights, no heating, no drug supplies. Winter. We've lost people already, and it's only going to get worse. Today on the Comic Book Report, Once and Future Deluxe Edition Book 2 from Boom Studios. Stick around and check it out. Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I'm excited to review Once and Future the Deluxe Edition Book 2. This is Volume 2 of a 2-volume set that rounds out the remainder of this Once and Future series, and wow, what a ride. Blending Arthurian legend in a really fun twist on modern fantasy genres, this series is unrelenting and just a ton of fun. That Dan Mora art is unparalleled, and I can't wait to talk about the rest of this series with all of you today. Before we dive in though, I do want to just say a special thank you to all of our friends over at Boom Studios for providing this review copy. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. First, some quick facts about today's collection. The issues in this volume are written by Kieron Gillen and penciled by Dan Mora. The comics in this volume were published by Boom Studios beginning in 2021. The volume itself collects Once and Future, issues 19 through 30. And finally, this is an oversized hardcover edition with glossy print paper stock, a sewn binding, and a total of 336 pages. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and issue a general spoiler warning. I will be flipping through the contents of today's collection and commenting on plot points throughout. You've been advised. Okay, and here's our first look at that oversized hardcover edition from Boom Studios, and this one is a beaut. It has just about all of the same features as the book 1 in this line. I'm happy to report it is another oversized hardcover edition. In case you are wondering, yes, it does stand taller than an omnibus edition. We have a nice field of black here with some really interesting kind of ornate design work that's also in black, but slightly glossed, which I really enjoy, just like book 1. We have a cool kind of skeletalized character on the front, our Once and Future, we have the creators, we have this nice book 2. The spine as well is very similar to what we had with the book 1. In fact, they line up and match perfectly. Love to see it, love the consistency there. This set looks really wonderful on a bookcase. I'll do a side-by-side with the volume 1 as well in a moment, just so you can compare them and see how well they did here. The back of the collection as well is also quite good. We have kind of minimalist design here. We have a little bit of that same kind of black gloss ornate work with a nice orange skull, some pricing information, publisher, things like that. It should be said there is a slightly more prestigious version of this collection, which is basically this identical book, but with a slipcase it slides into. Otherwise, I believe this hardcover should be identical. And talking about this book again, let's do a quick look at the binding. I think this is a sewn binding. It's a little hard to tell, but it is really well bound. It does have a nice little eye there, and this is a lot sturdier for me than my copy of Volume 1, which I did have a little bit of an error with. But yeah, it's well bound. It lays down pretty flat. I had absolutely no issues with this copy. And with that taken care of, let's go ahead and switch over to the side-by-sides I did with the book 1 in this deluxe line. So as I said, this is a 2-volume set, so this includes the entire run on Once and Future by Gillen and Mora, at least to date. They do kind of tease that there might be more for these characters in the future, but again, to date, this is the whole first main series for Once and Future. Both of these volumes do not have any kind of dust jacket, it's just the hardback book themselves, but I do think they look quite striking. Also worth noting, if you are collecting this series in paperback, the Book 1 Deluxe Edition includes the issues from the first 3 volumes of the paperback, and this Book 2 collects the final 2 volumes, volumes 4 and 5 of the trade paperback editions. But I'll go ahead and say it, I do think this is the definitive way to collect this beautiful series. I just love how these editions look. The spine design, just everything. Wow. Okay, and with that, we can go ahead and start jumping into today's collection. So, as I mentioned, this is Once and Future Deluxe Edition Book 2. As we open up the collection, we have some nice end pages, a title page, a 2-page kind of creator breakdown / publication information page, and then we jump right into the meat of the book. We do have a little chapter break that says Chapter 19, and then we dive into the 19th issue in this series at the start of the book. So, I did mention this in the Volume 1, but we don't have these issues covers presented at the front of each issue. Rather, they're all at the back in a cover art gallery. I am happy to say we still do get those covers. Again, they're just at the back. Interestingly enough as well, unlike something like Something is Killing the Children and their deluxe editions, we don't start over with a chapter 1 for this book 2. We're starting with the chapter it left off on. So this is chapter 19 of this one continuous story. So we have chapters 19 through 30, of course, going for each issue we have for the remainder of the series. But what's really fun about this book is we pick up a little bit after where we left these characters last. Basically, at the end of Volume 1, and here's a little bit of a spoiler for Volume 1, but basically King Arthur has retained power, kind of resurrected, and after the end of the last volume, the greater parts of England know that he exists and that there's kind of this mythological, fantastical, folkloric invasion of characters into the real world. And because of that, the whole of England gets thrown straight into this kind of otherworldly fantasy realm, or rather that realm blends into the real world. There's no real boundary anymore. In Volume 1, we saw this kind of otherworld-like place that the characters would trip into where it would get fantastical and we'd have a lot of these kind of folkloric Arthurian characters. Well, here it's basically everywhere. So we have the fun lighting effects that cues that there's something fantastical happening. We just have that as the all-pervading setting in this book. We do have a little bit of a time jump. We have this world that's now plunged into this fantastical realm. We start off the book essentially with our main cast of characters trying to hunt fairies or trying to evade fairies. And of course, in typical Gillen Mora fashion, the fairies of kind of folklore over in Europe are kind of twisted and made something new here. And these fairies are devious and monstrous looking in their way. But I thought that this was a fun way to begin this volume. And I like that we have a little bit of a time skip. I like that we don't pick up directly after the events of issue 18, but rather sometime in the future after kind of all of culture has been eaten up by this fantasy world. This book largely finds our trio of heroes, Gran, Duncan, and Rose, trying to thwart King Arthur and essentially restore their world. They're not really having a ton of luck. They're kind of a band of rogues at this point. They're also sort of holed up with some of the residents and staff at Gran's old retirement home, and they're basically just trying to make their way through. Earlier in this collection, we do have them kind of finding a new hideaway, and we have the three breaking away to try to make advances against the enemy action. A couple other plot bits we have throughout this book that I really enjoy. I am going to go kind of jump around a bit, but essentially we have more King Arthur's arise. Basically in this other world that's blended with our modern day, we have other versions of King Arthurian legend or different interpretation of King Arthur's basically show up. So we have our kind of zombie King Arthur we had from book 1. We have a more squeaky clean King Arthur that seems to be in the same retellings as the Lancelot we've already been introduced to, and a couple other King Arthurs throughout. They're all sort of vying for the throne, but they also serve to kind of undercut each other while our main cast of heroes try to come up with a larger plan. Gran, along with Duncan and Rose, they kind of discuss the fact that what's making the world in the state it is because everyone now knows the story, and like we kind of discovered in Volume 1, part of the lore for Once and Future is that stories get empowered the more you believe or tell them or associate with them, and because everyone knows, it just is the reality. So Gran's trying to come up with a plan to figure that out, and we don't know for a while, but essentially her plan revolves around making everyone forget. How she wants to do this, however, is to awaken King Lear, who in this rendition is sort of a water creature of some kind. Basically, they want to enrage him and have him summon a storm. But Gran wants to pair this with a kind of underworld-like river of forgetfulness, hoping that Lear will suck up these waters and rain down this forgetting rain over the whole land. So that's ultimately her gambit. Along the way, we also find the underground bunker of William Shakespeare, who was kind of a monster hunter fighter himself in his day. We have Gran snatch his quill, which we find out is the back end of an arrow that belonged to Robin Hood. And so we have Robin Hood showing up. He's definitely sinister and maybe not like we've seen him in some folkloric interpretations like a lot of the other features in this series. But we have ultimately our trio of heroes become part of the Merry Men. And this is one pretty wild band of characters. Throughout this time, we have them kind of waging guerrilla warfare against all of the different King Arthurs. Robin Hood's all about circumventing wicked kings, and basically it's a really fun period in this book. We have them traveling through any kind of woods and kind of developing a fast travel or teleportation like system, which I thought was novel. Another thing I really enjoy that Kieron Gillen played with and kind of uses in this volume is this kind of ticking clock narrative that we had set up in the first volume, where basically the Green Knight is coming to kill Rose in a year. And so throughout this whole series, that year's been counting down, and every so often we have these ominous appearances by the Green Knight, and ultimately that comes toward a climax at a really pivotal point in their battles. Basically, we have some of these time skips as they kind of teleport through the woods, and all of a sudden, wouldn't you know it, it's been a year. And basically, while this is all happening, in the background, we have other great development. We have them finding Rose's parents. We have a showdown with the kind of residents of the nursing home. We have Duncan's mother, Gran's daughter, showing up and becoming more prevalent. She kind of becomes an uneasy ally at certain points, trying to still save her son, who was kind of hideously mutated. We have Lancelot searching for meaning, feeling like he's lost his honor, and he becomes kind of an interesting character as well, as he tries to be more than just his story. We also have elaborate backstories with the character of Merlin and the King Arthur. We find out that Merlin is aware he's a story, and he's kind of cursed to repeat these cycles with King Arthur, whom he loves. And it's just a really interesting kind of lore building. There's a lot of other twists and turns throughout this that I could touch on, but I'm trying to hit some of the broader plot points that I wanted to mention. In the midst of all of this warfare and planning, we have the appearance of the Sword in the Stone. Whoever takes out this sword will be the official and real King of England. So, of course, all of the Arthurs begin to hone in their attack, wishing to protect the sword until they have an opportunity to pull it for themselves and show that they are the rightful King of England. This also destabilizes our trio of heroes' plan with Robin Hood, because even Robin Hood would bend a knee in fealty to a true king. So this is all happening all at once, and we have this really epic battle, and ultimately Rose is confronted by the Green Knight, and we basically have her stricken down. She gets kind of cut almost in two, but we find out that Duncan's mother actually stole the scabbard for Excalibur, which has healing properties. So in the next issue, we have her restored and ultimately grabbing the sword from the stone herself, becoming a kind of Queen Arthur, and she basically gets empowered, and we have a kind of final battle. This is the point where we have Duncan and Gran and everyone's plan to, go into this kind of underworld space and get the waters, and basically as this is happening, we have the forces of evil like Merlin and Arthur and everyone kind of launching this final attack. It's a really fun climax. Overall, I really enjoyed it. I thought it really satisfactorily landed the plane in many ways. Ultimately, the side of right wins, and everyone sort of forgets. We do have a tragic ending for Gran's daughter, Duncan's mother, who ultimately cannot leave her other son behind and ultimately is lost. And after everyone forgets, England is restored, and our heroes don't even remember their misadventures. But Gran goes back to her nursing home and finds a picture of the three of them. Happy but confused, she turns it over, and it has a note from herself in her own handwriting saying, "Vomit now," or something to that effect. After she does, she ultimately remembers after kind of drinking this potion to forget, and she calls up Rose and Duncan to make them forget as well, and then thinks better of it, kind of justifying that, they did what needed to be done. They didn't need to live with all of this horrible knowledge of what had happened. And that's kind of where we end the series plot-wise. I thought it was a really, really nice wrap-up. It left just enough open in the future should they decide to return to these characters in this world, but I thought everything was just put together and finished up really, really well. I was deeply satisfied with the conclusion to this book. Okay, that was a lot of plot-based reviewing there for you. I do want to go ahead and transition over to the art we have in this collection, again by the great Dan Mora, with coloring from Tamra Bonvillain. This is the same creative team we had in the first book, or the first, 18 issues of the series, and I really love that we have the same creative team throughout, which I always love because we get such a great consistency, cohesion, and I think that even with having all the same team members, we do have some striking developments or changes in this volume. I think casting this whole volume within a kind of fantastical landscape, kind of juxtaposed next to the Deluxe Edition Book 1, which was really in the real world and then had moments of fantasy breaking through or kind of journeys into this other world space, having the other world blend with the real world and having essentially everything be fantastical, really just kick the art in this collection into overdrive. This is where I see Bonvillain's colors really shine because the way she uses these colors, everything just feels oversaturated and larger than life. I don't really know how else to describe it other than it is absolutely jaw-dropping and captivating, especially when coloring Dan Mora's already incredible pencil work. I really think Dan Mora is effectively used in these kind of fantasy scapes because I love seeing what he comes up with. I love all the character designs. I think all of them are really striking and unique, and I do like that we had kind of a time skip element, so we get to see some of the characters with like bigger facial hair or more battle worn or, at different stages of their transformations and things like that. I all thought that was pretty novel and I liked it. I also liked some of the character work we got here from Gillen. I like to see the kind of full tragic arc for Duncan's mom. I think it was really pretty amazing. We had a lot of up and downs with that character. She betrayed, she was an ally, she loved, she hated, she, again, just a really complex, kind of tragic, almost operatic kind of character that I think was utilized very well. I did like the character of Grant throughout this whole series. She always felt like this kind of wise master that was kind of spunky. Even when she was really beyond her depth, I never really felt like she lost control of the wheel, if that makes any sense. I think some of the best development we got was with the character of Duncan. He starts as a total kind of clumsy everyman and becomes kind of an action hero. I guess there isn't too much depth to this character, but there's certainly a lot of kind of dynamic range this character had. We do get to see some growth, even if it is, in some ways superficial perhaps. But yeah, overall, a really fun character. I think Rose also got a lot more character work in this book too. They certainly elevated her character. We got some of her backstory between her legacy stuff with her parents and ultimately her ascension into queenhood in the book's climax. But yeah, this was overall a very fun collection. At the back of the collection, we have a great multiple-page essay called Arthurian Annotations that goes into some of the folklore or kind of telling of stories that Gillen approached the series with. I really enjoyed this. It kind of gave a added context to the series as a whole. I think the literary part of me really enjoyed this extra at the back. We also have a full cover art gallery. We have some variant covers here. It's all really beautiful, and I love that we have all the covers. It is just such a treat, especially for a fan of this series like myself. After the covers, we do have a sort of farewell from Kieron Gillen where he talks and kind of reflects on the series as a whole, says his thank yous, and again, kind of teases a potential future for this series in some form. Fingers crossed we do get to see that someday. I know I would really like that. And ultimately, that is the end of this deluxe edition. Oh, I suppose we can't forget the About the Authors page and the end pages, of course. But yeah, that rounds out this book. The collection is a bit shorter than the first book. Again, the first book, I think, collected 18 issues. This one collected, 11 or 12, perhaps. So yeah, a little bit smaller, but again, it rounds out the series nicely. And I know I, as a reader, was certainly satisfied. And now I think all that's left to do is to give this book a grade. For successfully wrapping up this series while making me beg for more, the Comic Book Report is happy to give Once and Future, the Deluxe Edition, Book 2 by Boom Studios, an A. This effort from Gillen, Mora, Bonvillain, and more was an absolute triumph, at least in my mind. If you enjoyed the Book 1, I think Book 2 is an essential. In fact, I think this might be an elevation of what we saw in Book 1. I really loved the ultimate conclusions we got for pretty much the entire cast of characters. characters. I think some of the creatures and folklore that were kind of brought into this volume in particular were really fun. I really enjoyed the ride all the way through. The action was there, the dialogue was great, everything felt very well paced. I definitely understood the sense of stakes, and overall, again, I couldn't have been happier with what we had here in this book. But you'll have to let me know what you think. Did you also enjoy Once and Future? Have you checked it out yet? Let me know all that in the comments, or if you have other great recommendations from Gillen, Mora, or Boom Studios in general. I would love to get some conversations going in the comments, and maybe, like I said, get some great recommendations. A huge thank you for everyone who's made it this far, and again, a thank you to Boom Studios for providing this copy. Until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to leave this video a like, that comment we talked about, and maybe share this video with a friend. Thanks everyone, have a good one.